Hey, friends. We are going to continue on with our Melissa Moore story, but one thing I wanted to note real quick is a few of you felt traumatized and let me know that there should have been a trigger warning before the animal abuse story in the Melissa Moore video. And I actually didn't know I was going to be reading that until I came across it in there. And you're right, there should have been a trigger warning on that. So I apologize, y'all. And it appears Melissa Moore makes it a point to tell that in all of our interviews and articles. So we will just be referring to that as the cat story and skipping over it whenever it comes up. So as I continued researching and looking up how Melissa Moore kind of came out as a public figure, as a murderer's daughter, I was surprised to find that she reached out to Dr. Phil. Now, I knew that she had done interviews and worked with Dr. Phil. What I didn't realize was that she reached out to Dr. Phil to decide whether or not to have a relationship with her father. Oprah and Dr. Phil both talked to her about it in this interview, and they kind of had to drill through to her that you absolutely cannot have a relationship with this man. You cannot introduce your children to him. He is a monster. And she was like, well, yeah, I get it. I guess I just felt like we had so many wonderful memories. And that is just considering the things that she told us about him, about how she didn't like being with him alone, how he would make her uncomfortable saying inappropriate things about her mother and every other woman around, how he told her he would be in prison someday and that there was something he would like to confess to her or he would go to jail. And she saw him commit multiple acts of animal cruelty. What the hell is she talking about when she says all these wonderful memories? Because she wasn't very old whenever her mom and dad divorced. She tells stories about the horrific abuse that happened after their divorce and all this stuff. She said her mom calls her dad a bit of a Disneyland dad because he would always have something planned. But she talks about being scared while she was with him. So, what was even making her begin to think about introducing her children to this man? I don't get it, y'all. And whenever she's talking to Dr. Phil and Oprah here, she says, "Oh, yeah, well, I guess my denial, it was just so thick that I had to come to terms with it and let go of the good memories." Again, I don't know what the hell she's talking about. No, I don't dare show any clips from that with the actual sound. I'm just showing it in the background here so y'all can see the expressions that she was putting on while talking about this to Dr. Phil. Now, let's read a more up to date article that references back to that. And let's going to see if the tone has changed. What's being said now? Okay, this article is from March of this year, 2025. Says what Melissa Moore, daughter of the Happy Face Killer, is doing now. When Melissa Moore was her child, her father had the nickname Disneyland Dad because he always had a fun activity plan. He'd take us bowling, fishing. He'd always say he had the best kids because we were well behaved. I loved him. He was my dad, Moore told People in 2009. But underneath that benevolent exterior was a chilling secret. Her father was Keith Hunter Jesperson, the infamous Happy Face Killer. Moore struggled to come to terms with Jesperson's true identity, and her own as his daughter inspired the new Paramount Plus show Happy Face, which began streaming Thursday. Based on her 2009 memoir and 2018 podcast of the same thing, the drama stars Annalay Ashford as Melissa Reed, a character based on Moore, and Dennis Quaid as the killer. Moore found out about Jesperson's crimes when she was a teenager and spent more than a decade wrestling with the knowledge. The reason I wanted to tell my story is because I felt alone. We don't really hear about serial killers' families, Moore told Deadline. We see serial killer documentaries, and it really focuses on the offender, but there's a lot of people affected by a criminal. Moore has put her words into practice by becoming an advocate for the families and victims of other criminals. Here's everything you need to know about Melissa Moore today. Moore saw warning signs in her dad. While Jesperson could act like a fun loving father of three, there were clues signaling his more ominous tendencies. According to Moore, there are cat stories there. Following his divorce from her mother, Rose Huck, in 1990, Jesperson began sharing graphic deals about his sex life during conversations with his daughter. Little did she know the reality was much worse. Jesperson had secretly begun a 5-year killing spree, murdering 8 victims while traveling as a long haul truck driver. In the meantime, he appeared sporadically in the lives of Moore and her 2 younger siblings, Jason and Carrie. Moore saw Jesperson for the last time at a dinner in 1994, just before her 16th birthday. She revealed during a 2009 interview on the Oprah Winfrey Show that her father nearly confessed to her at the restaurant. The conversation turned to, "Melissa, I have something to tell you, but you'll tell the police." "I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe stealing. I thought misdemeanors. I wasn't thinking murder," she said. Jesperson didn't divulge his secret that night, but it wasn't long before he did. Questioned after the death of his girlfriend Julie Winningham in March 1995, he admitted to her murder. Jesperson also wrote his brother a letter confessing to killing 8 people. According to People, Moore's sister saw Jesperson's mugshot on TV, prompting their mother to reveal he had been jailed for murder. The imprisoned Jesperson wrote letters to Moore, saying he missed his 3 children. He also suggested she and her siblings change their name, which Moore did. Reaching adulthood, Moore got married in 2000 and started her own family, but concealed details about her father from her children, Aspen and Jake. Finally, in 2008, Moore decided she could no longer hide from Jesperson's past. Moore began writing her memoir, Shattered Silence: The Untold Story of a Serial Killer's Daughter, which published in 2009. She also began giving interviews, announcing her identity as the Happy Face Killer's daughter. In a 2009 TV interview with Oprah and Dr. Phil, she spoke about why it took her so long to fully comprehend the evils of her father. The denial was so thick, I could just see the memories that we had of him as my father. I couldn't see the actions, the heinous actions that he committed. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. It was just too big for me. Then, in a 2014 essay for the BBC, Moore wrote that Jesperson, who is currently serving multiple life sentences at the Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem, deserves the death penalty for his crimes. She explained her reasoning, writing, "I don't say that for myself, but for his victims. Justice will never be served to them. I'm not going to go into the details of the horrific torture he inflicted on those poor women who were mothers and daughters and sisters. Not all his victims have been identified. There are some parents who still don't know where their daughter or sister disappeared to." Today, Moore is a successful podcaster and TV producer. Now in her mid 40s, Moore is divorced from her husband, Sam, in 2018 and got remarried in 2022 to Steve Kenoyer. She is a public speaker and advocate for trauma and domestic violence victims, as well as family members of other serial killers who are seeking advice and support. Moore has become an important figure in the true crime media following the success of her podcast, Happy Face, about Jesperson's crimes and the horrific legacy he gifted his children. The series was nominated for Breakout Podcast at the 2019 iHeartRadio Podcast Awards and returned for a second season in 2020 about the case of Diane Downs, who murdered her daughter and attempted to murder her 2 other children in 1983. Beyond podcasting, Moore has helped bring several true crime stories to television. She served as an executive producer to the TV documentary films Casey Anthony, Her Friends Speak, 2018, and Jodi Arias, The Friends Speak, 2019. Most recently, she executive produced 3 Lifetime miniseries, The Life and Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, about the former wife of football player O.J. Simpson, as well as The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, featuring the convicted killer on the eve of her release. Both premiered in 2024. The third project, Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup, is now in its second season. Now, Happy Face, which Moore also produced, is putting more spotlight back on her own story of resilience and acceptance. Happy Face fictionalizes several aspects of Jesperson and Moore's lives. Star Annalee Ashford told the Boston Herald the conflict within Melissa as she processed Jesperson's crimes made the character interesting as an actor to play. Ashford also lauded the real Melissa's efforts to help other families affected by violent crime. She has a real gift for empathy and an open heart, just so the opposite of her father. "I truly tried to live in that space of her spirit and show her goal was to make things right. That is such a worthy objective," Ashford said. The first 2 episodes of Happy Face premiered Thursday on Paramount Plus, with 6 additional episodes releasing weekly through May 1st. There's a lot of interesting things I noted in this article, friends. Let's go over them. I found it interesting here that she seems to have kind of dropped the story about her daughter asking. I'm only finding that in earlier articles or later ones that quote earlier articles. But this one, like I said, is dated March 2025. And what it quotes here is Melissa saying, "The reason I wanted to tell my story is because I felt alone. We don't really hear about serial killers' families. We see serial killer documentaries and it really focuses on the offender, but there's a lot of other people affected by a criminal." She's not wrong, but something about that just puts a bad taste in my mouth because it kind of takes focus off the real direct targeted victims and their family and friends, puts it onto the perpetrator's family members to cast them as equal victims almost. And in my mind, while they are victims of a certain type too, it's nowhere near equal of the people who are friends and families of the targeted murdered person. I don't know, it's very strange. And yeah, the story now is not because she needed to answer her daughter's questions and kids won't ask for things they're not ready for. God, that was such a ridiculous statement that she made in that last one. But now it's I felt alone and we don't hear about serial killers' families. I don't know. Something about that just doesn't sit right with me, friends. What do y'all think? Maybe I'm just biased. And then again, they talk about the warning signs. Those warning signs were really freaking bad. And they're, in my opinion, for her to have seen all those warning signs and then as a teenager find out that he confessed and went to prison for serial murder, grape, and strangulation. Why did she need Dr. Phil and Oprah to tell her it's not a good idea to take your children and have a relationship with this man? I understand he's her dad, but people cut their parents off for way less than serial murder. My God. I don't know. I'm just feeling like she does not have good instincts. And when a person doesn't have good instincts, it's really not good, in my opinion, for them to be having such a big platform to advocate for people who are actually murderers because she has switched up. She's not just advocating for murderers' families now. As we've seen with Gypsy Rose Blanchard, it's starting to creep into actual murderers. And we know from all the crap she said about the Gypsy case that she doesn't do her research. We have a clip here of Melissa sitting here saying that when Gypsy was in prison was the first time she ever tasted real food. When there's plenty of pictures everywhere of Gypsy eating real food, we have medical records that attest to all the different types of food she was eating in addition to her G-tube supplementation. And we have her prison emails talking about how she liked it when her mom made gumbo at Christmas and this and that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm finding Melissa Moore very problematic and dangerous. What do y'all think, friends? Am I going too far there? Now, something else that's weirding me out is when we look at her dad's patterns. Her dad wrote to people, he wrote to the media, he wrote a letter to his brother confessing he wanted people to know what he had done, and he still does, it appears. So people might wonder, especially since her story has shifted of why she became a public figure and started doing this, people might wonder, well, why did she? How did she get the idea to be an advocate, make money and donate money with this story and all this stuff? Well, were y'all aware that her dad started doing that from prison? Let's take a look at that, y'all. Okay, so as you remember, he was caught and confessed in 1995, and this article is dated December 1st, 1995. It says convicted serial killer Keith Jesperson says he's willing to sell his story, but wants any proceeds to go to his victims' families. Jesperson, 40, has admitted to 3 killings, 2 in Oregon and 1 in Washington state, and is being investigated in connection with murders in Wyoming and Florida. He also claims he killed 3 others in California. He is currently jailed in Clark County, where he is awaiting sentencing in the March murder of Julie Winningham, 43, of Camas, Washington. In a letter received Wednesday at the Oregonian, he wrote, I will grant interviews to different sources on the stipulation that all monies generated to pay for these interviews will be paid to the families of the victims that so far have been taken care of in court. Jesperson said he is aware of state laws that prohibit felons from profiting from their stories, but that some of those laws had been found unconstitutional. He said the money made from interviews would be administered by Bob Hay of KUTV Channel 2 in Portland. But Hay said he had not been contacted by Jesperson and did not know what such a request might involve. I have never been a trustee for anything, Hay said. Jesperson said he cannot give media interviews in the Clark County Jail, but promised to make himself available in Oregon. I would like to see some of the monies reach the families before Christmas, he wrote. I know I took away someone that was oh so dear, and I cannot bring them back to life. In addition to Winningham's murder, Jesperson has been sentenced in Multnomah County to life in prison for the 1990 strangulation of Tanya Bennett, 23. Jesperson also was charged in the Marion County in the November 1992 strangulation of Lori Pentland, 23, of Carlton. Jesperson is known as the Happy Face Killer because he drew smiling faces on previous letters to the Oregonian. That is the end of that article. So, a few things I want to point out. This part here feels like a taunt, where he says, I would like to see some of the monies reach the families before Christmas. And this part just feels taunting. I know I took away someone that was oh so dear, and I cannot bring them back to life. You know, that feels like he was just trying to remind them to me. What do y'all think, friends? But yeah, I can't help but wonder. So, from what we understand from Melissa's writing and just the articles I've read so far about her life at this time in the mid and later 90s after his arrest and conviction, it was a rough time for her. She was being abused. Her mom got with an abusive man. They had troubles. And here her dad, one of the big sources of all this trouble, is generating money for the victims, but not for them. I just wonder if a seed wasn't planted in Melissa that, hey, we're victims too. And well, that is correct. She is a victim. She didn't ask to be born to a serial killer. It's nowhere near the same level, the same trauma or need, in my opinion, of being close family to one of the victims of a serial killer, one of the actual murder victims. And her dad appears to be someone who was very apprised on the Son of Sam laws and how those had been ruled unconstitutional. But like I said in the last video, Oregon is one of the states that does still have some protections against felons profiting off their crimes. They might have dropped some recently, but they did maintain some. But he was someone who was checking into that. And since Melissa Moore was considering having a relationship with him, apparently she'd been talking to him a little bit before she went to Dr. Phil and Oprah to launch her public platform to have them talk some sense into her. I just can't help but wonder if he didn't make her aware that, hey, you're not prohibited from profiting off your story about my crimes. Then, possibly there could have been the idea of, hey, look what I was doing for victims. You could find other victims like you. I just have to wonder. So, here, let's take a look at a clip here of him, Keith Jesperson, having an interview in prison, and he's talking about how he wrote to the Gilgo Beach serial killer, Rex Heuermann, and he replied back to him. Let's take a look real quick.
I can't give any legal advice because I represent the state, but
I understand that.
but I can tell you that participation in this proffer doesn't guarantee that we won't prosecute, but it does guarantee that the state of Florida will not file a notice of intent to seek death penalty in any proceeding.
Well, that's fine.
So
I'll sign it. I don't have to read it. Like I try to explain to other killers that are regional are arrested, and I write to them. I tell them how the system works. Mm-hmm. I said the system is when you're dealing with serial crimes, there's a difference than with a single murder. That you're opening yourself up for litigation all the way across the board, and you don't have no say in the matter. It just continues and continues and continues. So I always try to tell people to own it. Just admit you're caught. The only way you're caught, if you're arrested, means that the prosecutor has enough evidence to take you to court and prove you guilty. They wouldn't have arrested him if they didn't, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I've recently got a letter from Rex Hewerman from the Long Island serial killer, and I had told him the same thing, and he wrote me back, said, well, you know, take it under advisement. So when I picked her up, she was headed to Lake Tahoe, Nevada.
Yeah, do you know, did she have ties there? Did she say anything about that?
All I know is that's what she said she was headed, and I told her, I said, I'm not going to Nevada. However, I don't even know where I'm headed. I've got to pick up a load, and I don't even know what load I'm going to pick up. But when I do, I'm headed to Washington State. So I'll be in the area. I could take you so far. And she was outstanding out there at the truck stop. And I parked in her next to the restaurant, and I just walked out to her, and I said, where you headed? And she said, and I said, oh, well, I pointed to my truck, and I said, well, there I am. I may be going to Washington State because I'm out of Washington State, and I'll head that way. I don't know where exactly I'm headed, but probably in an hour. In an hour or so, I'll probably be headed that way. So I just walked off, left, and I went in the truck stop and waited for my boss to give me a load going somewhere.
So you remember whenever I said that it feels like Melissa Moore is branching out not just to murderers' families, but in the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, an actual murderer. And then when we come to the Gilgo Beach serial killer, Melissa Moore launched her GoFundMe for Asa Ellerup, Rex Hewerman's wife, in July 2023. From what I can find from a quick search, and if anyone knows different, please correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't confirmed until ABC and a few other outlets put it out on November 30th, 2023, that Asa was not a suspect. She was initially a suspect along with her husband, and in a lot of people's minds, allegedly still is, because her hairs were found on some of the victims. In July, they took a cheek swab from Asa, and it matched some of the hairs found on the victim's remains. Well, the only reason she's cleared is because they determined that she was out of town on the nights of the confirmed murders and couldn't have participated. She had an alibi. Does that mean that she absolutely never knew what her husband was up to? She never saw anything that she suspected? Could it be that she was an accomplice who simply kept her hands clean? I mean, it just blows me away, y'all, that Melissa Moore immediately, before she was even cleared, it appears like allegedly, you know, unless I'm missing something, I want to put all the disclaimers there because I am doing the best research I can, but I'm not infallible, y'all. I might miss something, I might make a mistake. So I am not opposed to correcting myself if anyone knows more information than what I found, but it appears like Melissa Moore launched a big GoFundMe for Asa before it was even known for sure yet that she wasn't a suspect. So while I do absolutely believe that Melissa Moore is traumatized by the knowledge of who her father is and what he did, I feel like it might be clouding her judgment seriously because of the way that she's championed Gypsy Rose Blanchard without bothering to know half the details, the way she launched a GoFundMe for this lady before she even knew for sure if the lady was involved in the murders. I don't know. I'm just getting a really weird feeling about her. Very much so. So I'm going to read some more emails in the next video. And also I have some questions that I want to go over based on Stan Hancock's handbook that we read. I'm going to go over those things. And then also in an upcoming video, I want to dive a little more into Melissa Moore and the Gilgo Beach murder connection here, and the parallels that we see of how Melissa Moore propped up Gypsy Rose Blanchard and appears to be possibly going to do that with other people who might still be suspects in murders. So we will go out with a little palate cleanser here, friends. I've got some footage of Feline from the last time she came by. She didn't come by today, but from the last time that I still hadn't showed you all yet. And then a little footage of the cats. The lily in the pond still hasn't fully bloomed after Feline munched on it, but I'm checking on it every day, and I'll show y'all here. Little Johnny Helldiver kitten is doing really good, and he's over 2 pounds now. And what's funny, he loves that backpack that 1970 got him. Whenever he's just hanging out, sometimes he'll just go in the open zipper of that backpack and just chill out in there. He likes it. Well, I hope everyone's having a good day, friends. Let me know what all y'all think in the comments.